Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode. Today we are doing a Q&A video. Make sure you check the description for your question so you can jump to that portion of the video. Let's go ahead and get started. How do you transfer the focus that you have in the house to outside? One of the first things we do with any dog that we train is known as engagement training. During engagement training, we have two main goals. One, teach the dog that it's good or it's valuable to them to look at us. And number two, we're teaching them two of the markers that we're going to be using during our training. Now, what is a marker? A marker is a word or sound that predicts either a reward or correction. In order for a marker to be a marker, it must predict one of the four quadrants of operant conditioning: positive and negative reinforcement, positive and negative punishment. The first two markers that we like to teach: continuation marker, terminal marker. Continuation marker means you're going to receive a reward. Terminal marker means you are going to receive a reward, but you are also released. So, with that being said, the very first thing we do, known as engagement training, we teach our dogs that if they look at us, we're going to pay them for that behavior. So the dog looks up, yes, we give them a piece of food. The dog looks at us again, I like to use the word free. Then we move back, encouraging the dog to come and get the reward. So then, after enough repetitions, when our dogs hear yes, they know they're going to receive a treat, or of course, whatever word you choose. And when our dogs hear free, they're going to be released as well as receiving a reward. Now, we pay them for looking at us. So it's the act of the dog looking at us is what triggers the marker, which predicts the reward. So our dogs end up doing that behavior more often because it's valuable to them. Now, when we first start teaching our dogs anything, we start in an environment with less distractions, the least amount of distractions possible. As our dogs get better, we slowly add more distractions. Now, if you have your dog's focus inside the house, then you take your dog outside and you're losing your dog's focus, it's because of the different motivating factors that you're competing with within the environment. Remember, everything our dogs do is based on motivation. Either they're motivated to access something pleasant, they're motivated to prevent something unpleasant, or the behavior itself is fun. So if you want your dog to pay attention to you outside, you have a couple options. One, you can increase the value of the reward that you're using. You can make the reward that you're using more valuable. How do we do that? Well, we bring the dog out, we start doing our engagement training. The moment we lose our dog's focus, we take the dog, we put the dog inside, and we stop training. We put the dog in the crate and we stop training. Losing focus ends the game. Now, in between training sessions, we don't feed the dog. So during this portion, when we're really building our dog's engagement, we make them work for every bite of food. So they have to understand that if they want to eat, they have to work for it. So I take the dog out, they lose focus, I put them away, and I say, great, we'll try again at dinner time. I bring the dog out at dinner time, we start working. The moment I lose my dog's focus, great, I put the dog away, and we're gonna try again the next day. Up until the point where the dog is willing to work for the food, because now they realize that if they want to eat, they have to do what you're asking them to do. So that's one. The next option is to use a higher value reward. I don't recommend doing this because then you're increasing the dog's pay grade, but it is an option. If you have your dog outside and you're trying to train with, let's say, the dog's kibble, and the dog's not interested in the kibble because it's not that valuable to the dog, and you want to quickly get results and you decide to use chicken, sure, you might get your dog's attention, but now you increase your dog's pay grade, and now they're not going to want to work for the kibble anymore. So I would rather increase the value of the kibble instead of using a different reward, but that's an option as well. When your dog is not paying attention, we can use leash pressure to cue the dog to pay attention to us. So we turn pressure on. Once the dog looks at us, boom, we turn the pressure off. Remember, leash pressure is negative reinforcement. In order for negative reinforcement to work, once the pressure is turned on, it cannot be turned off until the dog complies. And number two, the moment the dog complies, the pressure has to instantly be turned off. So we can use that to get our dogs to pay attention to us. And then last, we can use positive punishment in order to get reliability. When we're working with our dogs, the two things, again, that fall under obedience is a dog not doing something we ask them to perform, or a dog not staying in a stay. Before I correct a dog for any behavior, I have to make sure that the dog knows what's expected of them. So they know the command and they know how to turn off pressure by complying. So if I give a dog a command and they still don't know it, and I still have to assist them with a physical cue, I have to give them the answer, then we're not ready to correct them because they still don't know it. Same thing if they break a stay and they don't know that it's a stay yet, we can't correct them for it because that's very unfair. But if your dog knows that there's a command where they have to look at you and your dog is choosing not to do it, then we can correct them. So anytime I correct a dog for a behavior that I don't want them to perform, or if they're not doing something that I'm asking them to do, for example, we tell the dog sit, the dog chooses not to sit, we go no, we give the dog a correction with the training collar, we repeat the command sit, then we use the leash or a lure, whatever it is, to get the dog back into the position. So it's no correction, recommand, assist. Same thing with breaking a stay. The dog breaks a stay, no correction, recommand, assist. Even if the dog goes back on their own, we still correct, we still recommand. If the dog's already in the position, good dog. But we still go through that same process. It makes it much easier. So if the dog knows the command and you give them a command and they choose not to do it, no correction, recommand, assist. If the dog's in a stay and they break the stay and they know they have to maintain it, no correction, recommand, assist. And it's the same with the engagement. Remember, everything is based on motivation. So your dog either has to be motivated to focus on you in order to possibly get access to a reward, or your dog has to be motivated to pay attention to you to prevent a correction if they choose not to pay attention to you. This is how we get our dogs to do what we want in any given situation, by controlling the motivating factors that determine what our dogs do. Just like me, I know your dogs are incredibly important to you, so having them insured is a no-brainer. Keeping your dog safe and healthy is probably one of the most important things to you, so you want to make sure you provide them with the best in everything that you do, whether it's the nutrition you're feeding them or the insurance that you have to keep them safe. Prudent Pet is the ultimate option to make sure your four-legged family members are covered and protected. Their pet insurance plans cover a variety of needs for your pet with a ton of customizable options. Plus, if you sign up through my link, you'll get 5% off. So don't waste any time, click on the link below and make sure you get your pet insured. How do you recommend managing a reactive dog? My girl has high prey drive, so she breaks heel whenever she sees a rabbit, bird, or squirrel. If she sees another dog or jogger, she instantly starts vocalizing and lunging. What would you do in such situation? It always depends on where the dog is in training. A lot of times I go to a session, I show up, and the person has a dog that is reactive on walks. This is a common problem. And I get there and the first thing they want to do is take the dog out on a walk. Well, we can't do that. We can't just address the issue right away. We have to build the dog up, meaning we have to teach the dog how we communicate with them, what they need to do if we say a certain word or a certain sound. All these communication channels is the most important thing. These markers, the stuff that I talk about all the time. So if I show up at a lesson and they want to work with their dog being reactive, the first thing I do is the engagement training. I make sure the dog understands the markers. Then I make sure the dog knows how to follow a lure. This is where we guide the dog with food. They get in the position, we mark and reward. Then I teach the dog leash pressure. Then I start adding commands. So we have all these ways of communicating with them, so then when we take them out on a walk and we tell them something, they know what it is that we're asking them to do. Now, if the behavior is based on fear, and I've talked about this in other Q&A videos, you have to use what's known as counter-conditioning and desensitization. Counter-conditioning, taking something that they believe predicts something bad and you make it predict something pleasant. We change what it means to the dog by changing what it predicts. Desensitization, we introduce it at a very low stimuli and we gradually increase the stimuli as the dog becomes more confident or proficient with what it is that we're working on, mainly confidence. So a good example would be gunfire. If you're trying to get a dog, let's say a police dog that you're working with, accustomed to gunfire, you start very far away so they can barely hear the gunfire, and then over time you get closer and closer up until the gunfire is not a big deal anymore. Again, you start at a low stimuli and you gradually increase it as the dog becomes more confident. Now, if it's not based on fear, then often we can just correct it. We can tell the dog that's not an okay behavior. If you do it, you're going to receive a correction. But just like I said with the last question, we have to make sure the dog knows what's expected of them and they know how to turn off pressure by complying. We do that by teaching them the commands and by teaching them leash pressure. So if I'm taking a dog on a walk and I know they know heel and I know they know how to maintain that position, they know the stay, then I'm going to use a correction. The moment the dog breaks the heel command, and barking is breaking the heel command. Heel is a position, but it also means don't be barking and making a bunch of noise or whining. If I have a dog in a downstay, they're not allowed to bark or be obnoxious in the downstay either. That's basically a version of breaking the stay. So if I have the dog in heel and the dog starts to break the heel, then I can give them a correction. Just like I said before, no, correction, recommand, heel, assist, and get them back in the position. If you are giving your dog corrections to stop unwanted behaviors, then that means that the motivation to do the unwanted behavior is overriding the motivation to avoid or prevent the correction from happening. If that's the case, then you have to increase the correction. There's a great analogy that I like to teach people, and it's the speeding ticket analogy. If you're speeding down the highway and a police officer pulls you over and writes you a 25-cent speeding ticket, you're probably going to keep speeding. But let's say on the other extreme end of the spectrum, he pulls you over and writes you a $100,000 speeding ticket. Now you're going to avoid the behavior entirely. That's an avoidance level correction. Now you're stressed. You don't want to drive. But let's say you get a $200 speeding ticket. That's enough to get you to slow down without getting you to avoid the behavior of driving. It's the same with our dogs. You have to give your dog a speeding ticket that's appropriate to your dog's bank account. Some are very rich, meaning they need a high correction level. Some are very poor, very low correction level. So again, if you give your dog a correction, but they continue to do the bad behavior, a couple things could be happening. One, either your timing's off and your dog doesn't know why they're being corrected, or the corrections are not high enough and the dog is more motivated to do the behavior than they are to avoid the correction. So we have to increase that. Another option is getting your dog desensitized to seeing people on skateboards or whatever, other dogs passing by. A lot of times if I'm trying to get a dog more comfortable with seeing other dogs, then I take them to a dog park, but I don't take them into the dog park. I take them outside of the dog park and I have them watch the traffic. If I'm so close that my dog's being reactive and barking, then that means I'm simply too close. I move farther away. We decrease the stimuli to a point where the dog can handle it. As the dog is comfortable over time, we can get closer and closer. But this helps get our dogs desensitized to it. Another option, if you don't want to use positive punishment, you can use leash pressure. This is something I use often if I'm working with a dog and I'm not implementing any sort of corrections or positive punishment. I have the dog on the walk, the dog starts to bark, I say wrong, that's my marker that predicts negative reinforcement. Then I use the leash to cue the dog into the sit. Once the dog stops barking, then I turn off the leash pressure. And again, leash pressure, once it's turned on, can't be turned off until they comply. Once they comply, instantly turned off. So then the dog learns if they want the pressure to be turned off, they have to be quiet and sit properly. So that's another great option. And if you realize your dog doesn't know any of the training yet and you're trying to work with this dog, then go back, teach the markers, get your dog to understand all the different positions using luring, teach leash pressure, teach the stay, add the commands, make sure you do all the appropriate steps so then when you are in a situation, you can communicate effectively with your dog, showing your dog clear expectations of what you want them to do in that situation. How do I cut my dog's nails without having to do a sneak attacks while she is asleep? She allows me to touch her paws, just won't let the clippers get close. All right, when it comes to cutting our dog's nails, there's a couple options. One, take your dog to the local groomer and have them do it. That's what I like to do. Or we can also just make them do it. So a lot of times when we're trying to get our dogs to do something, if we just make them do it, then they start to realize that there is no option, they just have to do it. If you're trying to get your dog to do something and your dog resists, and whatever they're doing to resist what you want them to do works, then they continue to do that behavior. So for example, let's say you're trying to put a collar on your dog, you go to put it on and your dog starts biting at your hand. Not hard, but mouthing at your hand, and you go, oh, I better not put that collar on. Well, now the dog knows that biting at your hand is going to prevent you from putting the collar on the dog, and the dog's going to continue that behavior. If I'm going to cut a dog's nails and they're mouthing at me or they're whining or whatever it is that they're doing, and I stop, then they know that that behavior works and they continue to do that behavior. As long as the dog is not afraid of the nail clippers, then I just cut their nails. I just make them do it. I don't give them an option. And again, once they know that they don't have an option, then they're more willing to let you do it because they know there's not an option. If they learn that they can fight or resist and that works, then they will continue to do that behavior. If you have a dog that's afraid of it, then you have to go back to the counter conditioning and desensitization. You have to introduce the dog to it very slowly, Maybe bring out the clippers, mark and reward. Maybe make some noise, mark and reward. And just slowly over time, get your dog comfortable with it by pairing something pleasant with the clippers so it creates that strong positive association. This takes a very long time, but it does work. It just takes time. You have to get the dog comfortable with it. Like I said though, if the dog's not afraid, I just make them do it. And that's what most groomers are gonna do as well. They don't have time to start getting a dog comfortable with their nails getting clipped. They just do it and then they move on to the next dog. So that's one of the most successful options, is just making them do it. If the dog tries to be aggressive, then maybe muzzle training the dog could be a good option before you start clipping their nails. So safety is always important. And if the dog is afraid of it, we want to do that counter conditioning as well as getting them desensitized to it by a good amount of exposure. But yeah, simple answer. I wish I could give you more, but like I said, take the dog to the groomer, have them do it. Just do it. Don't let the dog try to stop you from doing it. Make sure they understand that if you're going to cut their nails, you're going to do it. Or get them comfortable with it, counter conditioning, desensitization, and let them know that the clippers actually mean something pleasant and not something unpleasant, as that's what a dog often thinks if they're afraid of something. They think maybe something bad or unpleasant is going to come from it. So we do that counter conditioning. How do you train fetch and retrieve with an adult dog who doesn't seem to understand the game? If I'm trying to teach a dog how to retrieve or how to play fetch, well, first it depends on if I'm teaching a formal retrieve. So if I'm doing something for, like, let's say service dog training and the dog has to pick up keys that have been dropped, the process for teaching that is way different than when we teach a dog fetch. So fetch is more of a game. Now, the first thing is we want to make sure the dog has a good amount of toy drive. They're willing to chase the toy. One of my favorite exercises that I like to do to build a dog's toy drive, it's known as drive building. You can see a modified version of it in my How to Teach Your Dog to Bark video. But basically you have your dog on a back tie, you tease your dog with a toy. When your dog gets excited, you reward them with the toy, and then you play kind of like a tug sort of game with them. If they drop the toy, you tease them some more. So you want to get them to want to hold on to the toy. That's a big part of it. I also like to work with dogs with ball on a rope. So then if the ball's attached to a rope, you can have them chase it. Once they grab the ball, you keep the ball active even after they have it. So what happens with a lot of dogs is they'll grab the toy will no longer be active. That makes them bored and they drop the toy. If we keep the toy active in their mouth by keeping it alive using the string that's attached to it, they're more likely to hold on to it. So I want to teach the dog to hold on to the toy. Once I have that down, so I have a dog that's going to chase the toy and I have a dog that's going to hold on to the toy, then I can start playing fetch. I do have a video on this. I like to use what's known as value transfer. So I get two balls that are identical, not an old version and a new version. No, two identical. So two brand new tennis balls or chuck it balls, whatever it is that we're using. We throw the first ball and we make sure our dog is on a long line. Our dog goes out and gets the ball. Once they get the ball, we can use the long line to guide them back to us, hoping that they don't drop the toy because we've worked with them, so they want to hold the toy now because we've done the training beforehand. We get the dog to us, we show the new toy, the dog drops the old toy, and then we throw the new toy. Bringing out the new toy ends up being the drop it command. So your dog comes over. If you know presenting the new toy gets them to drop the old toy, you can add a command. So your dog comes over, drop it, bring the new toy out, the dog drops the old toy, free, and then you throw the new toy and your dog goes and gets that, and you repeat that process. But the main thing that people struggle with is getting the dog to fetch it, so you have to build that toy drive, and getting the dog to hold on to it. They must hold on to it. And again, we do that by using a ball on a rope, and we keep the ball active when it's in their mouth. You want them to want to hold on to it. If they're not holding on to it and you can pull it out of their mouth using the rope, then you tease them with it. Once it slips out of their mouth, you start teasing them. Now they're chasing it. Now next time they get it, they want to hang on to it even harder than they were before. So we want the dog to hold on to it. Then again, we use a long line. We get the dog back to us. Drop it command, bring out the new toy, they drop the old one, we throw the new one. And we just continue to repeat this process. Your dog will quickly learn the game. They go out, they get the toy, they come back, they drop it in front of you, you throw them a new toy. And you just continue to do this, and it shouldn't take too long before you have a dog that can play fetch. How can I make my dog more focused and enthusiastic like the dogs in your videos? My dog seems to lose interest after she gets 2 or 3 rewards when I'm training her. Okay, so this is very similar to the first question. This falls back on engagement training. If I'm working with a dog and that dog just doesn't have that much focus, I bring the dog out. It's known as food deprivation, but the thing is we're not preventing the dog or we're not refusing food. It's the dog is not training. So we bring the dog out and we say, hey, you want to train? And the dog says, no, I don't want to train. And we say, okay, no problem. We'll try again later. The issue that people run into is they feed their dog or they do free feeding, meaning they just have a bowl filled with food and then they wonder why the dog doesn't want to work for food. Well, the dog has free access to food 24/7, so why would the dog possibly want to work for it? If I'm trying to get really strong engagement from a dog, and this is also why the puppy imprinting stage is so important, those first 16 weeks of a dog's life, during that time, we're trying to really build up the dog's drive, their motivation to want to train, their food drive, the toy drive. All these things we're trying to build so then when they get older, we can use this for training and it becomes much easier. But again, if I'm working with a dog and they don't have that much engagement, that much interest in what I'm doing, then I have to increase it by increasing the value of what I'm having the dog work for. So bring your dog out, start working with your dog. The moment your dog loses interest, no big deal. Pick your dog up, put your dog back inside in the crate, and then don't feed your dog again until you train in the evening. Bring your dog out in the evening for training, start working with your dog. If you lose interest or you lose focus, good, put your dog away. Showing your dog that if they lose focus on you, the food goes away. And I can almost guarantee that if you do this correctly, you're gonna start getting way more engagement and way more focus from your dog. Because your dog's gonna realize if they wanna eat, then they have to work for it. And if they wanna work for it, they have to maintain focus on you. And of course, this is gonna transfer to everything else, teaching commands, teaching the stay, anything, precision obedience. Having that focus is very important, and we can do that simply by using this technique. One more time, you bring your dog out, start training. The moment you lose focus, put your dog away. No yelling, no getting upset, nothing like that. Cause and effect. You lose focus, you go in your crate. You maintain focus, I'll continue feeding you. And your dog's gonna figure that out really fast. Very important, don't let anybody in the family or any friends give the dog food or treats or anything in between training. Make your dog work for every bite of food that they have, and that's going to greatly increase the amount of focus and attention that you get from your dog during training. Thank you again for watching, everybody. Please let me know what you think about it in the comments below. Of course, as always, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, share the video with family and friends, and I will see you guys next week.